Okay, in the movies, these types of heroes are not uncommon. But when was the last time you met a real-life Indiana Jones? Someone like Wade Davis. Born in British Columbia, schooled at Harvard, he spent the last 35 years trekking through the most remote corners of the earth. Up mountains, consumed hallucinogenic plants, braved secret rituals, and he's done it all to paint a picture of indigenous cultures at the brink of extinction. Wade's first book took us deep inside the world of Haitian voodoo, and if you're of a certain age, you know that monster bestseller became a movie by Wes Craven. I'm pausing, because good Lord, I loved it. Serpent and the Rainbow.
Get out of here!
Since then, Wade has turned his adventures into more than a dozen books. He's worked on 20 documentaries.
One takes refuge in the Buddha, considering him not a god, but a guide.
And his stories have inspired 3 episodes of The X-Files. Now he's got 2 new books. Into the Silence. It's about the legendary British mountaineer George Mallory and his team of men who died trying to scale Everest. Wade explores what it was that made these men so fearless and obsessed. The other one is called The Sacred Headwaters. It's a call to action to stop the mineral and fuel mining in BC's Stickeen River region, a part of the world that when he's not trotting the globe, Wade calls his summer home.
Wade Davis, everybody. Nice to see you, man. How are you?
Good to see you.
Thanks, welcome.
That's some introduction.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the program. You've been on once. It was a long time ago, early on. There's 2 books to talk about, 2 different things, but I want to focus on the first one, the End of the Silence, the Mallory story and Everest. He's got this great quip. Why? Because it's there. And that's kind of what inspired almost everybody, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, that quip happened in New York when he probably was just trying to, at the end of a lecture, get rid of someone who was standing between him and a stiff drink. But it kind of distilled the essence of pure desire that led these men to Everest. And, you know, Mallory, for those who aren't familiar with him, he, you know, famously led these expeditions in 1921, 22, and 24, where in 21, just to find the mountain, they had to walk 400 miles off the map to sort of fling themselves against the mountain. And famously on June 8th, 1924, as he made his final attempt, he was seen going strong for the top when the mist rolled in and sort of enveloped his memory in myth. And the big question for mountaineers has always been, did he get to the top of Everest before he died?
Yeah, and I mean, there's arguments on both sides. You know, where they found his body, did he develop some...
I mean, I think it's unlikely that he got to the top.
I mean, the next person didn't get, the original Hillary didn't get there until much later.
1953.
Right.
But I was never really interested, George, did he get to the top? I wanted to know the spirit that carried him on, and I had this feeling that all that generation had gone through the agony of the First World War. And not that they were cavalier about death, but in a way, death had no hold on them. It had nothing more to teach them save that of their own.
Because they saw a different kind of death, the kind that they didn't have what we had, which we have TV, and we've seen death depicted fictionally and not. They saw it differently.
Oh, you know, it was like to do this research was like a journey through the twilight shadow of hell. I mean, think about this. Before World War I, cremation didn't exist as a way of dealing with the dead. After the war, it became the preferred form for tens of thousands who had lived 4 years and 4 months in the presence of rotting cadavers of dead soldiers. So the war had such an impact on every single phase. And so my thought was that maybe life mattered less in the moments of being alive. And because of their experiences in the war, Mallory and his colleagues and comrades were prepared to accept a level of risk that might have been unimaginable before the war, and it was that kind of risk and that kind of courage that Everest demanded.
Let me present another scenario to you, and I only raise this because I experienced it when I was lucky enough to interview Farley Mowat, who's told some great stories about the wilderness in this country. It's not just about the risk. He also experienced the war. How much of it for these guys was it just to get away from humanity? So risk was not as, like, it was part of it, but just get away.
Well, that's actually a very profound thing you just said, because in the wake of the war, so many men, there was a chasm that existed between those who had lived at the front and those who had stayed home and often profited from the war. And in the wake of the war, there was this feeling that people had to get away anywhere, anywhere. You know, so people traveled all around the world just to feel the heat of the tropics. Men who had, you know, been in the marble landscape of winter at Ypres and had the shells shatter the ground around them. You know, they just wanted to get away. And in part, that's what Everest was. It became a sentinel in the sky. And if the desire to climb Everest before the war was kind of a gesture of imperial redemption for an empire of explorers that had lost the race for the North and South Poles, in the wake of the war, when so many had suffered, it became kind of a mission of regeneration for a nation bled white by war. You know, of the 26 men who went to Everest, 20 had seen the worst of the fighting. One of them, for example, Jack Hazard, literally climbed to the top of the North Col in 1924 with open wounds bleeding from the Battle of the Somme beneath his climbing tunic. You know, 6 had been severely injured. One suffered shell shock.
Hardcore.
Hardcore, no kidding.
Like just a personality, like what you have to have inside you to get through that.
I mean, these men had a level of grit that, you know, even, you know, I mean, people often, like even in your introduction, you know, the Indiana Jones. I mean, yeah, I've gone to a lot of places.
Dude,
but
you were zombified. I saw Serpent in the Rainbow. That shit's crazy.
I mean, nothing compared to these guys. I mean, there's this guy, Sandy Woollaston, who was a naturalist in 1921. He on a 24-hour notice, joins an expedition to go to the mountains of the moon in Uganda, takes 3 months to find the expedition, spends 9 months in the jungle, then he's got to go home to Britain, and why on earth would you want to go back the same way? So he walks from the source of the Congo to the mouth. I mean, these guys were from another reality.
So if those are the reasons why they did it, why do you do it? Because it seems really important to you to tell these stories.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you're trying to show us something, or are you trying to find something?
Yeah, that's, you know, I think that in a way, I'm trying to find something. People often ask, why do I end up studying Voodoo or Buddhism or traditional religions in the Amazon? And I think, you know, when I was a devout Christian when I was a boy growing up in Quebec, and like so many of us, when you learn the history of the Christian involvement, say, in the Americas, you become disillusioned. So in a way, my spiritual quest is a way of trying to find that faith that I, you know, and similarly, I think, you know, I always wanted to know a life of adventure, the fur traders who cracked open Canada. And so I've always been drawn to these epic journeys of the past, and in my own small way, tried to replicate them in the present, in my own life.
I'll tell your father for a second, because we were talking about those men from the war, both your grandfather and your father in separate wars, the big ones. Played a role. Your dad wasn't the guy that climbed Everest after his experience with the war. When he brought the war home with him, what did you experience?
Well, it was my father, like all people of that generation, you know, they never spoke about it, but it was never forgotten. I don't think until you see what a war like this can do, the first and the second, but it was really, you know, the people who came out of the Western Front, I mean, just think of the fact that, you know, every month 10,000 young lieutenants had to be found just to replace the litany of the dead, you know, plastic surgery born from the war and the need to repair the faces of young boys scarred by shell fire who for the rest of their lives would live behind masks that could only be removed at special holiday camps so they could feel the touch of the wind on their faces. I mean, you know, I think one of the reasons I wrote the book, Into the Silence, was really to do honor to these men.
We're almost out of time, and I don't want to go without showing this book, especially if you're looking for holiday gift and stuff here. This is a great photography book, coffee table book, The Sacred Headwaters. This is where you live.
It's my home.
It's where you live.
Yeah.
Just show some pictures. We'll put some pictures up. Just tell us what these are.
Well, this is actually a photograph I took from the beach of my lodge on Yalui Lake in the heart of a country so beautiful that it pales. There's nothing I've ever seen like this.
You didn't take that moose down.
No, I found that moose in a slough at the end of the lake. My wife's birthday is July 24th. The nearest town's 7-hour drive, so I always bought her furs, but I bought every fur you could ever buy. So I found that rack and I dropped it in from the float plane, and I said, honey, I found the perfect gift for you. Without missing a beat, George, she said, I don't want a moose rack. she just read my mind. You know, I mean, this book is really about the most beautiful valley in Canada that's being overrun by a tsunami of industrial development, and in a way, because Canadians love the idea of the North, but too few of us go there, we felt we needed to bring this valley to the Canadian people so that they would be aware of the decisions that are being made in their names, decisions that will, if allowed to go ahead, violate a place that's the rarest jewel in the planet.
Do you think people really care? Like, I want to think they do, man, but they don't vote like they care. And I know that environment issues poll high, but Canadians would much rather have tar sands with a good economy than no tar sands with a tougher recession.
But that's not our,
the
wonderful thing, that's not the
how
choices, you know what I mean? Because one of the advantages of a commodity boom is it becomes a seller's market. In other words, we don't have to take every project that comes along.
True.
We can actually plan the way forward. So it's not about mines or no mines, it's about how many mines at what pace, for whose benefit, and with what consequences for the environment.
Here's another picture. Tell me about this one here.
Oh my gosh, that's in the Spectrum Range. This is one of the most beautiful parts of the Stikine Valley.
This is Canada. People have.
This is Canada. I mean,
look like
you could, you know, Canadians just don't realize the bounty of our landscape. And I mean, as an explorer in residence at National Geographic, I go to 30 countries a year, you know, and our travel office takes people everywhere. And the place where their breath is taken away is Canada.
So great to have you. So Into the Silence, The Great War, Mallory and the Conquest of Everest, and also this one here, Sacred Headwaters, both absolutely worth reading. Wade Davis, everybody. We'll be right back.
Thanks, George.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We're really excited, man.